Alright, top 100 KC Cup deck lists. Before we get to the list, we'll look at the overall composition of the top 100. Of course, this doesn't include every deck that made the top 100 of the KC Cup, as not everyone has reported their decks. A few more I'm sure will, but not everyone is going to do so. So we'll go off the data that we have as of right now. As we can see, DDD actually took the most spots in the top 100. I think this is a big surprise. A lot of people didn't think it was the best deck, that it was just sort of a gimmick deck that can do alright here and there and would get a few spots in the top 100. I don't think anyone was expecting it to have the most spots, though, with 13 spots here at the top 100, 13 players using it in the top 100. A few players did use multiple decks. I did decide to go ahead and include those. But yeah, nonetheless, so DDD taking the number 1 spot, quite surprising. Phantom Knight in number 2 with 11, that's not really surprising at all. Same thing with Gandora at number 3. These were sort of predicted to be the top 2 decks of the KC Cup, so it's no surprise to see them being used by a lot of those players in the top 100 here. But metalfoes is another huge surprise there. This is another deck that people thought would maybe get 1 or 2 in the top 100, if that, but they managed to get 6 in there, and as of right now, we're the 4th most well-represented deck in the top 100. Good to see that at least some of the Pendulum decks are having success here, with both DDD and metalfoes making it into that range, but metalfoes especially being that Pendulum deck, running the rescue cards and all that. Really nice to see that they're actually having some success here. Lunai does well in this format. We'll talk about they have some of their good matchups here, although they do have a bad matchup as well, but Lunai's doing really well to get 5 spots also in the top 100 of the KC Cup. Quite surprising to see, I think, to see them do that well. I think, kind of expected to get a couple spots, but again, I think they did better than a lot of people thought they would. Also, Buster Blader took up 3 spots, another meta deck that did alright, probably around expected, maybe a little underperformed a little bit, but they also have a lot of one-ofs right here. Evil Hero, Abyss Actor, Witchcrafter, Senju, Chronomaly, Fire King, Evil Eye, Harpy in Burning Abyss, and Destiny Hero. I think Harpy is a huge surprise. They only got 1 deck in the top 100 as of right now. I'm sure there may be a couple others that just haven't reported, but still, Harpy did not perform particularly well in this KC Cup. I think that not having access to the side deck really hurt them. Burning Abyss also, I think, feel like underperformed a little bit too. I thought they might have, or would possibly do a little bit better, but it appears that's not to be the case. So let's go ahead and dig into the deck lists. The first place overall list was a Phantom Knight deck. Pretty standard list here. We have our 11 monsters, your Book of Moons, your Cosmics, your couple trap cards. You do see a little bit of differential in these lists, particularly what trap cards they run usually. Some are running the Treacherous like this list. You'll see others running things like Floodgate and stuff, and changing up how many anti-back row cards they're running, but generally this is a pretty much a what you call, like, I guess you could say, a standard deck for the Phantom Knight core. And again, no surprise to see this deck doing really well. It was predicted to be probably the best deck of the KC Cup, and it did get the first place spot, so definitely no surprise there. Taking up this number 2 spot and the number 3 spot was the Heavy metalfoe deck. This was the big, I think, surprise deck of the tournament besides DDD. Again, I don't think a lot of people really expected this deck to do well at all, and getting the 2nd and the 3rd place spot in this tournament it is not only surprising, but it's incredible to see it happen. So, congratulations to those players for managing to do so with this kind of Pendulum deck and the Fusion Monster. So, we're really happy to see it get up there, and interesting to see how this deck will perform, though, going forward, like in side deck formats and tournaments. It's really interesting to see just how much of this was just players just weren't expecting this deck versus how much it just does really good in a best of 1 format. Interesting to see when we introduce side decks in tournaments how well the deck does. As I mentioned, the 3rd place deck was also a Heavy metalfoes player. Pretty much the same list, except they included the Summoner's art in here, increasing the number of cards in the deck, but basically still searching out whatever or the things that you need with it. So, yep, again, congratulations to those players. Heavy metalfoes, one of the big surprise decks of the tournament. 5th place was another Phantom Knight deck. Again, pretty standard core, going without any anti-back row cards and a lot more back row themselves, maxing out on the Floodgates, the Econs, and the Book of Moons, with another trap in there. That's quite terrifying. Next up in the 6th place deck, we had our first DDD deck of the tournament here. Again, DDD did really well. They had the most spots in the top 100 as of right now. Book of Moon, Floodgates, they have this new sort of like flip down idea where they're just constantly flipping down your opponent's monsters with the Book of Moons and the Floodgates. Also running Econ, we see the one up here, and you'll see people running different ratios of those 3 cards, but those are pretty much the standard 3 back row cards are running with it. But DD also having a lot of success. We'll go ahead and talk about these decks more in depth, like the actual deck lists, in deck profile videos in the future. I'll do some on a number of the top decks here, including DDDs and some others, going over the decks more in depth in their actual deck list. But yeah, again, congratulations to DDD. Really happy to see some of these Pendulum archetypes actually having success here in the KC Cup. Next up, we had the 8th place player who ran multiple different decks. We see another DDD list, pretty much the same, with just some different ratios on the back row cards. Lunalights took a spot here in the top 8. They're also going to have the 9th place deck as well. Lunalights have a lot of really good matchups here in this metagame. Things like Phantom Knights have trouble getting over them sometimes. Also, card or decks like the Heavy metalfoes have trouble getting over Lunalights at times. So they have a number of really good matchups, but they do have a really tough matchup though in Gandora. We see Rarsiki also is using that deck here, and Gandora can just, you know, be absolutely devastating. This deck can just accrue so much advantage. Banishing every card on the board and in the graveyards is just really ridiculous. Yeah, not surprised to see Gandora being one of the best decks of this tournament. But again, not the best deck though, but still really solid. And we'll see more of these as we go down the line as well. Also do a video on Gandora. Also, the 8th place player also was using Evil Hero at some point. I don't know what order, you know, at what points he was using these various decks, but I still thought I would put this up here because Evil Hero is still having a little bit of success in the KC Cup. It's good to see. Next up, I mentioned the 9th place deck was the Lunai Decks. Pretty standard here, except for running the Needlebug's Nest. I haven't seen that too often, and it's a really neat idea to be able to trigger a bunch of Lunai effects. Besides that, again, we talked about it. It has a lot of really good matchups here in the metagame. You just got to try to dodge those Gandora decks. And a lot of the Gandora decks have been moving away from Levianeer, so they still can struggle against, or Lunai can still struggle against them. But that the Levianeer makes it a little bit less, little bit less punishing. And the 10th place deck was another DDD deck. Again, we see pretty much the same monster ratio and the same spell to trap cards, just with the differences of the ratio between the Floodgates and the Econ and the Book of Moon. Next up, the 12th place deck. This is our first, like, I guess you could say, by itself Gandora deck, a player who wasn't running other things. Again, Gandora took a number of spots here in the top 100. It's a solid deck, incredibly powerful, really high ceiling. Another thing I wanted to point about this deck is using the Karakuri monster in order to go for your synchro summons. You can actually add it to hand with the Ancient Gearbox because of its attack point value. So it just gives you another tool that you can get into, to go into your plays, and I think it's a really nice little addition to the deck to throw that in there. But again, we see players moving away from the Levianeer in the Gandora deck. Not as many players using to run it, instead going for more of those machine cards to get into those XYZ plays, and in this deck go into synchro plays as well. Next up, we have Buster Blader. Again, we had a few of these in the top 100. Buster Blader has a few good matchups here, does well against Gandora and other Dragon decks as well. I think it suffers a little bit from consistency at times if you can't open up with a little Buster Whelp and be able to search for your trap card and get going. Nonetheless, though, you still have the skill which can let you get to it really easily. Cosmic Cyclone allowing you to trigger it, be able to get your little dragon out of your deck. So still doing well. We also see the Stygian Dirge here in the main deck. I think that's really interesting, choosing to run that trap card in the main deck here. But it does mess up a lot of decks right now that are trying to go into XYZ summons to just throw off their levels. So interesting tech choice. Next up, we have an Abyss Actor deck here to talk about. Abyss Actor didn't perform particularly well in this event. Nonetheless, though, not surprised to see them get into the top 100 here. We see they take the 19th spot in the tournament. Yeah, not too much to say about it besides Iwano. Not a card I've really seen too often in Abyss Actor. I mean, I think I've seen some people side decking it, but obviously in KC Cup we don't have access to that, so we see cards like this in the main deck, cards like Shadow Imprisoning Mirror, stuff like that that people are running to counter the metagame right now. So yeah, interesting to see Abyss Actor still doing well. Also another what do you call Pendulum deck that is having success in the metagame. Again, it's good to see because we've had a history in the past of this game with archetypes not doing, like summoning conditions not doing well during their reign, right? XYZ is not being as strong during the XYZ era, Synchro is not being as strong during the Synchro era, so it's good to see Pendulums actually having success during the Pendulum era. Next up, we have a Witchcrafter deck. Witchcrafters, you knew there was always going to be at least one in here. No surprise there. They're not the best deck of the format. They have some good matchups, but they have a number of other matchups that they really struggle against. But there's always going to be at least one or two players that are going to play it into the top 100 of the KC Cup, because it is a fairly popular deck, and it does have those matchups. And if you pilot it correctly and you make all the right plays, you can definitely have success with it. Next up, we have Senju here in the 26th spot. Senju, not too much different than what we've seen with this deck in the past. You have your Kite-Roid to help protect all your hand traps. You summon your monster, try to activate your trap card to bounce your opponent's monsters. Not too much out of the ordinary here with the Senju deck. Again, not surprising to see a single player sneak into the top 100 with it. Again, there's a lot of decks where you can say, yeah, not surprising to see one person get in there with it, and that's what a lot of these decks have done up to this point. Chronomaly, another one of those. We see this player is using DDD as well. Also running the Chain Disappearance in the main deck here in the DDD deck. Talk about, again, a lot of these side deck cards being main decked instead because of the best of one format that we're in. But yeah, Chronomaly, another deck. A little surprising to see one get in there, but I mean, Yeah, a lot of people do like this deck. People do play it, and it's not the worst deck ever. You do have some a nice skill to go along with it. It's not the worst deck, so I'm not too surprised to see someone having success with it, sneaking into the top 100 with it in the KC Cup. Next up, we have an 81st place, our only Harpy list so far. Again, Harpy Lady is a deck that feel like really underperformed in this tournament. I guess that's kind of a good thing if you don't like Harpy Ladies, but on the other hand, it means that Konami is probably not going to nerf them again. So if you're one of those players who's been, asking for Harpy Ladies to get nerfed, given the fact that they didn't do too well in the KC Cup, I'm not sure if they're going to do that. So, but yeah, Harpy Ladies are kind of the disappointing deck. I don't know if people just weren't playing it, if it's just the metagame choices. I'm really going to have to dig into that. Harpies is a deck that I really like, so I'm looking forward to trying to figure it out over the next few weeks and seeing, what went wrong with Harpies. Is it just the fact that we just don't have access to the side deck? Is it going to do a lot better in tournaments with, with the side deck still available now? We'll see how the meta shapes up going forward, because again, we are probably expecting a ban list here relatively soon. And then next up, in 97th place, we had Burning Abyss. Again, Burning Abyss, I kind of expected maybe another couple of these to make it into the top 100. Only one making it in and barely making it in at that. Nonetheless, though, BA does have some solid matchups in this metagame. I guess it does kind of struggle against certain things like Gandora. I'm not sure what its matchups are like against some of the new decks like... I called them new decks, but new decks to the metagame, I should say, in metalfoes and DDDs. Perhaps that's a large part of the reason why they didn't have more success. Maybe they struggle against those decks. I can see that being the case. So nonetheless, so Burning Abyss, not surprised to see at least one sneaking into that top 100. And then lastly here, in 99th place, we got a Destiny Hero deck. Again, not surprised to see one of these get in. It still has some good matchups. Being able to search MST from your deck is going to be effective in a number of different matchups. There's some decks like Gandora that really don't play back row, but when you go up against those decks that do, being able to search for MST from your deck is still really powerful. And you can get those easy OTKs with the mass change, running too treacherous in there. It's just one of those, getting the +2 up to Celestial. There's just a number of things with this deck that can still come through for you. So not surprised to see one player, again, sneak into the top 100 with it. Congratulations to him and to all the other players who made it into the top 100 in this tournament, in the KC Cup, and everyone else. Well played. And that's it for all the lists here. We'll go ahead and again, we'll be digging into some of these deck lists over the coming weeks, more in depth into actual deck profiles. But until then, thank you guys for watching.